What is up, everyone? Good Friday evening. This is the Daily Fix Show on Fantasy in Frames. I am your host, Keith Flemming, joined as always by my brother and DFS degenerate, Joe the Brain Matz. Joe, what's going on, buddy?
Just excited for this weekend of football. I mean, to me, this is it obviously always depends on like how the games actually play out. But this is always the weekend of football, give or take week one, because you're all jacked up and you're like, maybe this is our team's year. And then as well, Falcons fans, it's never your year, and as Giants fans, it's
it's been a while.
You get that brief run, and then it all falls apart for a decade. So yeah, I mean, this is we've removed the Steelers and the imploding Eagles of the world, where we're like, these teams they're not real. And I mean, one of my favorite things, like thinking through these lineups, is that we have 7 first-round quarterbacks, and then we have Brock Purdy, and of course, the matchup of 2 former number 1 picks is Jared Goff versus Baker Mayfield.
Did you have an NFC South and AFC South being in the divisional round on your bingo card? Because I did not.
I'm trying to think if I had any faith in either.
Both champions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
I'm talking about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Think about it.
Yeah, like a week ago, obviously, I was like, I got Houston over Cleveland.
Yeah, I know. You just keep rubbing it in, Joe.
No, I mean, not really. Obviously, like the Bucks, if Baker was healthy, I would have been like straight up picking them like everywhere. Right. But instead, I know on Facebook I put the Eagles, and then I was like, fuck that. I'm putting my actual money on the Bucks. So that worked out great for me.
Good for you.
But yeah, I mean, you're obviously looking at those 2 divisions, especially the NFC South, all season, and you're like, cannon fodder, like they were last year with Tom Brady.
Joe. It's pretty rough. Well, we're here again to get you ready for DraftKings Divisional Round. What me and Joe are going to do this week, same as we did last week. May even try to do it next week. It's going to be a little difficult with 4 teams, but we'll figure it out. But we're going to give you an official DraftKings lineup. These are for cash games. But let's hit that baller-ass intro before we get going. All right, let's get right. Actually, before we get into it, let me real quickly just plug how awesome Fantasy in Frames is. If you are not following them on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, what all the kids are using these days, Joe, on social media, you should be. A lot of amazing content. Our boys at 4th and Frames, that's Chris Bastel. Probably butchered that name. Sorry, Chris. He's Canadian, so it doesn't really matter. Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott, they did a year-end review, which was highly entertaining. I totally recommend you check that out on the YouTube page. And then again, just, follow and share some of the posts on Twitter and other spaces. We appreciate all of your support. The other thing real quickly, Joe, before I forget, for my Twitter page giveaway, pick a number 1 through 2,000. Don't think about it.
Wow.
You're thinking, Joe.
1,114.
All right. Thank you very much.
I had to think for a second. I was like, whoa, I was not expecting
it's a lot of numbers. I know.
I guess, I do see all your tweets about we reached the new number. So I should have known, but still, it's like, 2,000. All right. Shit.
Well, we appreciate all the support for sure. Keep following all of our content and give my boy Joe a follow. He is the last person. I whore myself out. I'm like, hey, please follow me. Please pay attention. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Joe is not that way. But just a lot of cool stuff from Joe, a lot of underrated tweets. You can find out about cool movies and TV shows and, other stuff. I guess occasional Arizona Wildcats, tweets and stuff, but
it's been an interesting time as an Arizona Wildcat fan lately.
I don't care.
Part of this Saban dominoes.
Part of being a Georgia fan. Oh, well, I do feel bad about the football deal, but all right, let's get straight into the DK. Again, we're doing a lineup. This is for cash games. For those that are new, which I doubt you are if you listen to DFS show, but just if you are, real quickly, cash games are single entries, 50-50 double ups, or just like if you're playing a 30-person pool with your friends, right? Where you're throwing in $10, $5, whatever. In cash game lineups, you don't have to be flashy. You just need to get 150 plus points, especially on a slate like this. I promise you, if you get 150 plus points in any cash game, 50-50, you are going to hit your money. Highly recommend playing smaller entries, no more than seriously 1,000. Like up your ante a little bit. Don't say do 2 or 3 of them, and just do one at the price you're going to, and do it with, say, I don't know, 200 to 500 people. You can do really well in those. But the main thing is you're probably going to cash, which that's the whole goal of why we're doing this. So my lineup, it starts with Baker Mayfield at QB. He's the cheapest QB. I understand because he's Baker Mayfield. If we were probably ranking the QBs, he would be 8. No disrespect to Baker. But this Lions secondary, we've been picking on it for quite some time now. And they've given up 23.5 points or more in 8 of their last 10 games to opposing QBs. That's not good. Nick Mullins, remember, in 2 games threw for like almost 900 yards and scored 50 plus points in those 2 games on DraftKings. And the great part is this game's in a dome. It's the only one that is inside. And the Lions offense is really good. So they're going to score points. This is the kind of game at Baker's price where I could see him going out playing really well and the Bucs win. I could see them getting boat raced and Baker ends up scoring enough points at 6K to justify it being a good play for cash games. All we're looking for is 18 to 20 points. Oh, by the way, Baker scored 19.8 points or more in 5 of his last 6. Obviously, you got to pair him with Evans. You talked about the Lions play on our show last night. The Lions play as much man defense, in the top 10 in the NFL. Mike Evans kills man defense, 3 yards per route run. And last week, I know it was bad. He killed me too. I had him in a lot of lineups. 3 for 48. But if you give him his 2 drops, that's at least another 60 yards and a touchdown. Now he's over 100 yards with a score. The Lions this season have been one of the worst defenses versus number 1 receivers. We saw a big, physical, athletic dude in Puka just smoke this secondary last week. And Mike Evans is like the godfather of big, athletic wide receivers. So I feel really good about that. I think it's a value. CMC obviously has to be in your cash game lineup. Like our buddy Dave Eddy from Fantasy Six Pack says there's 3 things that are certain in life: death, taxes, and CMC in cash games. And it's not even close. Green Bay is the worst defense out of the 8 this weekend. They're probably the worst. Actually, they are. They're the worst run defense. In fact, most of the other run defenses are top 10. And CMC has gone bananas when he's been rested. He's basically had 2.5 weeks off. His last 2 games with San Francisco, where he's had at least a week's rest, he has 350 yards and 5 touchdowns. So I got to have CMC in there. So far, we built the lineup with Baker, CMC, and Evans. For me, next, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we were talking about it right before we came on the show. For cash games, I feel like it's basically you're going to be able to have 4 guys, 6K or more. Your QB, and you're going to get 3 others. That's all you can fit and make a lineup. Like, that's it, unless you just want to get really crazy with every other position. And that is not a good way to cash. So the decision for me was St. Brown or Nico Collins. I really want Collins because who else are the Texans going to throw to? He's $1,100 cheaper. But it would shock me if Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't score 18 plus points. It would not shock me if Nico Collins doesn't score 18 plus points. St. Brown has been automatic in home games this year. I talked about it last week. If you watched our show, he's averaging over 22 points per game on DraftKings in home games. He scored at least 18.2 in every single one of them. Over 9 targets per game at home. He has at least 7 in every single home game. He's averaging over 7 receptions per game, at least 6 receptions in every game at home. And he's averaging over 100 yards receiving and has at least 70 yards receiving in each game at home. And then last week, what did he do? He went out and he had 7 catches for 110 yards, scored over those 20 points. I can't exclude him. I just can't. So that means my expensive core is Mayfield, Evans, St. Brown, and CMC. So now the question is, where do you go? The next person that was an automatic for me was Isaiah Likely, 4,700 at tight end. Once Mark Andrews was out, I can't not play Likely. The Texans have been a defense that we have constantly picked tight ends who were playing against them this season on this show, our show on Fantasy Six Pack. Over 9 targets per game allowed to tight ends, over 6.5 receptions per. And then, last week, the Browns' 2 receivers combined for like 12 receptions for 140 yards on like 17 targets. So they reminded you yet again, they're very vulnerable versus tight ends. Isaiah Likely's a problem anyway. I mean, this is a team that can't cover tight ends, and this guy is basically a wide receiver playing tight end. So he was the next automatic play for me. Then it was Khalil Shakir, 3,800, arguably the best value on this slate. You completely convinced me of this. I was leaning this way anyway because Gabe Davis does look like he's going to be out. But you made such a great case when you talked about last night on the show that Kansas City, very good versus number 1 receivers, very good versus number 3 wide receivers, below average versus number 2 wide receivers. They basically give up the exact same yardage to number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. That is not normal in the NFL. It's not good for Stephon Diggs. It's very good for Khalil Shakir. Josh Allen has been incredible in the playoffs in his career, 16 touchdowns in his 5 games. He's had over 350 total yards in 3 of his 5 games. Like, I expect Allen to show out. That's really good for Shakir. And at 3,800, I just had to have him there. The running back position, I honestly didn't have much of a choice. I went Justice 4,800. I kind of believe in this play, though. The Dalvin Cook thing scares me just a little bit. I'm not going to lie. We still don't totally know what the hell Harbaugh was talking about when he said he could potentially be a big weapon in their playoff run. But Justice Hill in his only game since the Keaton Mitchell injury, where he's out, on IR, with all their dudes, Lamar and everybody else, he scored 22.2 points. Earlier in the season, before Mitchell became a factor in this backfield, week 9, he was consistently scoring 6 to 12 points every week. I don't have a lot of money left, so I'm just going to take my chance with Justice Hill. And the great thing is he is really electric, so it would not shock me if he took 1 carry or 1 catch to the house, and he's automatically then a good play at only 4,800. So we're down to the bottom of the barrel here. I think I have, let's see, I want to add this up real quick. I'm not great at math. I have 6,500 left. Not a lot of options. To be honest, I went last with defense, and I just ended up going with Josh Reynolds, 3,700. Tampa, not good versus wide receivers. Khalif Raymond's going to be out again. And Reynolds, the last 2 games with Raymond out, missed the entire game last week, almost the entire game the week before, 7 targets in both, 5 receptions in both. He's somebody who has had 5 games of double-digit points this year, another 3 of 9 points or more. So that's 8 games of basically being right around his 3 times number. I just think that there's upside in that again because both Detroit and Tampa are good run defenses. That is why I love having 3 receivers from this game with Evans, St. Brown, and Reynolds. You could talk me into Palmer, and I may still eventually adjust to Palmer in this because he also is better against man than he is against zone. He's a speedster. But I just think Reynolds is going to get volume, which is so important when building a cash lineup because we can't predict what the outcomes are going to be, but we can predict roughly how many targets, touches, et cetera, guys can get from, the data that's available. That left me with 2,800, and I kept going back and forth, but I actually ended up picking the Buffalo Bills at 2,800. I think they're going to get it done and beat Kansas City. Mahomes, I don't know. I just think he may turn into Allen in this game. Everything is flipped, right, where Mahomes doesn't have as good of weapons. Mahomes is on the road. I have a feeling Allen's going to outduel him. My choices at that point were basically Buffalo, Kansas City, Green Bay, and Tampa. I did think about Tampa, but I don't like having Reynolds and St. Brown and then tanking Tampa as well. And I mean, they said that last week that stadium was as loud. This is what Sean McVay said, as any stadium he's ever been at any time. So that is a huge advantage for the defense. Yeah. And you can't make adjustments and stuff at the line. I do think that it's more likely that Tampa Bay makes mistakes than Detroit does a lot. So that is my lineup. Any thoughts before you get into yours, Joe?
I mean, I'm not surprised based on our,
the hour and 45 minutes we talked about this slate last night.
Our podcast discussion on Wednesday, which probably was 30 minutes to an hour, and then our marathon 100-minute podcast last.
Check that out if you want to hear an hour and 40 minutes of stats at Fantasy Six.
If you're just all in on hearing everything that we have to say. One great stat that I heard on the Athletic Football Show. I was listening to the Robert Mays and Nate Tice. Great podcast to listen to. So, scary thing about going with Baker Mayfield, which I am also doing. Second worst game of the season on DK. Worst game was the Week 18 hobbled ankle, busted rib playing against Carolina game that scared me off of him last week, sadly. So only other game he was under 10 points was against Detroit early in the season. Now, big change that happened for Detroit's defense since then is post-Detroit's bye week, according to Next Gen Stats, which Nate Tice was kind enough to mention on the podcast, they have run man 37% of the time since their bye. That is fifth highest in the NFL. So you mentioned that they play a pretty high amount of man. It's gotten ratcheted up since their bye. So they're playing more man than almost any other team in the NFL. Baker Mayfield, 0.31 EPA per drop back against man. That's MVP level stuff. I can't remember.
So what's the concern here, Joe? You just you tricked me there because
that's what I'm saying.
It's like, holy shit, now I'm even more all in on
that was my concern. Now, the question is, how good of a defensive coordinator do you think Aaron Glenn is? Because if Aaron Glenn's smart, he's going to do what he did in that game. He's going to play a ton of quarters. They're going to be dropping back deep. They're just going to dare Tampa Bay to beat them with the run game. That's 100% what they should do. The best defense by DVOA this season against the run, the Detroit Lions. And I don't know if, I think some people, just because of fantasy football and how well Rachaad White finished, they might trick themselves into thinking Tampa Bay had any ability to run the ball this season. They would be mistaken. 27th in adjusted line yards. This is not a team that runs the ball efficiently. So I am concerned about this. But again, their whole defensive shift over the second half of the season is to play a lot more man. That's also why, if you're going down the Mayfield route, which we both are, 100% Mike Evans has to be in your lineup because you're hoping they're going to continue to play man at least a third of the time. In that case, Mike Evans eats man coverage, so has to be him.
I think he kind of showed last week, though, with going to Otten so much and just really spreading it out that I think Baker's at another level right now. I mean, again, I didn't say this to Chris when we did the show tonight because I love Chris. I love Dave Eddy. I know they're big Lions fans. I think the Bucs are going to win this game outright. Like, that's just my feeling. They got a lot of veterans. I trust Baker Mayfield more in a big moment than I do Jared Goff.
Fuck. Dude, I'm trying to decide if I agree with that. I guess I agree with that. There is a stat that will come up later that has me a little bit worried about Tampa Bay winning, and almost caused me to completely shift my well, not completely. There'd be a lot of guys similarly, but shift my quarterback strategy.
Again, the good news is though, if they're down, that's not necessarily bad for Baker because at his price at $6K,
right? If Detroit scores a bunch of points,
you can survive. Like you really,
we're not freaking out about. Yeah, we don't need Tampa for this purpose. We do not need Tampa Bay to win this game.
Or I'm saying even for Baker to have a monster, I just need him to get 18 points and we're golden. But what I like about Baker is there's upside where, versus Philly, another bad pass defense, he could have a 30-point game, I think, pretty easily.
Oh, 100%. So, yeah, I've got Baker. If you're going to have Baker, then Mike Evans, 7,200 100%. That's the lock. It's like if you're going Jared Goff, if you don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown, what are you doing?
Or in my opinion, if you go Josh Allen, you got to double stack him with Shakir and Kincaid to kind of make up for what you did.
If
or
you're
Cook,
really,
if you want to go Cook and say.
Or the thing that you should not do in any cash game is if you're going to go to the CJ Stroud route, which I think is nuts, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. CJ Stroud keeps proving doubters wrong constantly. You got to have Nico Collins. There's zero question. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So now Green Bay and San Francisco, Godspeed picking the right guy. So yeah, we're locking in Evans if we're going Mayfield, which we are here. Christian McCaffrey is the lock of the week. There's no reason not to do this. As we discussed last night, the history of the San Francisco Green Bay rivalry, which, ninth time these teams have played in the playoffs during the Shanahan era, is San Francisco wants to punch Green Bay in the mouth and run the ball. And this Green Bay defense, not great against the run, but not atrocious, which is a change of pace for them. But even if there's
they
some
give up
success
a lot
there,
of passes to running backs, which is the other thing.
Right.
It's like I could
because even if Green Bay gets up like they did last week early, all right, we're not concerned about Christian McCaffrey. He's one of the handful of backs where I'm not concerned at all about game script. He's in there regardless. They go up big like they did against Arizona recently. He had 18 carries, 115 yards, scores 45 points because he scores 3 touchdowns and has, even in a game they were crushing, I guess Arizona scored some points in that game, but 5 receptions for 72 yards. Plays against Baltimore. That game goes south for San Francisco super fast. He gets 10 targets, 6 receptions, still finds a way to run for 100 yards because Baltimore is just trying to protect against big plays late in the game. So he's gashing them, 28 points. The only thing you're worried about with McCaffrey, again, knock on wood, this doesn't happen. Injuries, which is why I would consider the Elijah Mitchell combo, particularly in a cash game. If you're going tournament, I don't think there's any way.
I'm with you.
Because then you're just kind of handcuffing yourself, and that doesn't make sense in a larger field. In a smaller one, if you want to protect yourself, I don't think it's nuts. I still ended up going Justice Hill there, like you did, because as we'll see, just kind of needed the money. And, barring McCaffrey getting hurt or San Francisco just absolutely destroying Green Bay, which I don't actually think is going to happen because I think Green Bay will keep pace for at least a little while or stay within striking distance. You're not getting anything out of Mitchell if that happens. So Justice Hill, like you said, monitor that Dalvin Cook situation. But because if that happens, then I might just change up my strategy and say, fuck it.
I'm with you. I'm hoping that there's a report that Dalvin Cook will be playing very limited snaps, if all. I want to hear that.
Yeah. So that, and then dropping down to my next guy that's a must-have. I'm with you. It's Amon-Ra. I mean, again, Tampa Bay, it's Todd Bowles. They're going to blitz a lot, especially the last game they played. Maybe there's some changes from what we've seen on the other side of the ball. I don't think we're going to see huge changes from the Tampa Bay offense versus the Detroit, or the Tampa Bay defense versus the Detroit offense. Todd Bowles is going to blitz. Last game blitzed over 50% of the time on third downs.
Wow.
What happens if in that situation? Well, who Jared Goff's going to look to first? It's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown every single time. So in that game that they played against Tampa Bay in week 6, he had 15 targets, which for him is maybe not.
Well, I forgot Tampa gives up a ton of targets, receptions, etc. to slot, which Amon is one of those guys. He knows the number one
primarily going to be in the slot.
Yeah.
So that was his second highest target total of the season. If you want to, I don't think you want to go Stroud. I think there is an argument for Nico Collins this week. Amon-Ra's highest target total was against Baltimore in a game that they lost by 32 points. So there's always the chance that Houston's getting crushed. And
what did he score in that game? Just out of curiosity.
Amon-Ra had 13 receptions for 102 yards, so 26.2 points in a game where Detroit scored 6 points. So again, I'm not going to recommend betting your money on the Texans or putting Stroud in there, but I do. I'll come back to this because I have a few different like potential lineup changes.
Basically, to get if you like everything about this lineup so far, if you want to get Collins in, again, you can do it.
That's pretty
you just
much
have to lose either CMC or St.
Right.
Brown. You can't, or an Evans. Like you can't
or
have
Evans,
all four
but
of those
I don't
guys.
want to lose any of those guys.
You can have 3 of the 4. You can't have 4. I've spent way too much time trying to figure out a way to do it. I've heard you can do it on FanDuel. I cannot figure out a way to do it on DFS.
Right.
It's like literally impossible. Not just, you're stuck with this guy. You can't do it.
So, So I'm locking in Amon-Ra because I'm with you. I think the 3 guys that I immediately was like, I want these guys in my lineup. It's Amon-Ra, it's Evans, it's McCaffrey. So that leads me to Khalil Shakur. Like I said yesterday, he is effectively the number 2. Now, I would say number 3 guy in the pecking order, but he becomes the number 2 wide receiver. And
which from a coverage standpoint, that's who is going to be covering him, right? Like the same defenders that have been giving up all this yardage is going to be covering Shakur, not Kincaid.
And that is the one kind of big weakness wide receiver wise for this Kansas City defense, which again, L'Jarius Sneed, awesome. According to FTN Fantasy, Kansas City is giving up the second fewest yards to number 1 receivers on the year. So that's why, Stephon Diggs, God bless him. I'm not going to roll with that this week. Then you go number 3 receivers, which would be normally the Shakir role. They're 5th in yards allowed. And so those numbers are 49 yards to number 1 wide receivers, 35 yards to number 3. So again, only they and the Patriots giving up under 50 yards per game to number 1 wide receivers.
Wow.
They give up, it's only 0.2 yards, but they give up more yards to number 2 receivers than number 1 wide receivers.
That crazy.
Puts them 25th in the NFL in yards per game to number 2 wide receivers. So
because think about the disparity in targets to number 1 wide receivers and number 2 wide receivers on teams. So that means that for the season, with a lot less targets, number 2 wide receivers are gaining just as much yards.
Right, which even, when you account for the targets that Kansas City is giving up, they're giving up 2.5 more targets to number 1s than number 2s. So it's more yardage on 2.5 fewer targets. So way less efficient against number 2 wide receivers. And then we've got Shakur coming off back-to-back double-digit games. He has the 100-yard game against Miami in their must-win, to win the division. And then last week against Pittsburgh, not a huge game, but he catches a touchdown. So we've seen him the last 2 weeks have the 100-yard game. We've seen him have the touchdown game. I'm not going to tell you, I think both are coming this week and he scores 25 points. It's not impossible, but, again, 3,800, I'm just hoping for someone who will give me 12 to 19 points, which is what he scored in each of the last 2 weeks. Then I'm feeling great. Tight end, Isaiah Likely, as soon as Mark Andrews got ruled out, I wanted to get Likely in there. Did it
hurt to not have Kittle? Because that's the one thing that, I keep going back, am I screwing up? I looked at it, the last 4 games, the Packers, opponents, their passes, 25.6% of the targets are going to tight ends. And they played the Panthers, the Vikings, who were Johnny Munt and, John Oliver, Cole Kmet, and then obviously the Cowboys last week. But I keep going, man, are we missing that? That's the one more than anything I keep kind of racking my brain about, because I love Likely obviously as well, but it's just, don't you think he's got the better technically matchup, because we know the targets, and he doesn't have Debo, you can CMC to compete with.
You know what? Fuck it. I am going to change it. I'm going to go with George Kittle now that I'm looking at my salaries that are left. I had a few different options here, but because if I do that with the flex and the defense, I only have 6,000 left if I go Kittle. But I am okay. Again, I'm a little worried, as I'll get to, with playing the Bucs defense. But I'm okay with rolling with K-Dot and Buxty, because, again, if I'm going Mayfield at QB, why not have 2 pass catchers?
That
especially when
a lot of sense.
K-Dot's coming off the 8 reception, 11 target game, where I want to say he dropped all 3 incomplete passes. It was at least 2 of them. I feel like it was 3. So Baker Mayfield, obviously on his game last week, which, again, easier to do against Matt Patricia's defense. But like you said earlier,
The Lions defense, I keep telling you,
Detroit
Lions secondary
defense
is not
one
good.
that we're
It's not
terrified of.
good. No.
So now, obviously, the risk there is not a whole lot of production the previous, 3-4 weeks for K. Dotton. But again, granted, Houston is also a terrible defense, which is why you would want to play likely against tight ends. He scored 24 against Houston. He's coming off 17 against Philly. K. Dotton's not, again, he's capable of giving us 15 plus points in a game.
He plays every snap and
awesome.
runs every route too, which is a big benefit. Like a lot of other guys who are more expensive, they don't play as many snaps and they don't run as many routes as games. Like Otten he's always on the field and he's always running routes on passing plays.
So yeah, if I'm going in on Baker, I may as well do that. And then
I like this a lot.
Obviously, I think, the one reason I kind of like to likely versus Kittle is I already have McCaffrey. So I kind of don't like not having a Raven in this game because I think I'm okay with not having a Green Bay player just because, again, so hard to predict.
Last week, I gave every Packer except freaking Romeo Doubs. Good call.
Right, which I was on the same page with you on that. I still kind of want a Green Bay Packer in there, but again, you have to guess right.
Wicks would be your guy, right? Number one.
Wicks would probably be my guy. Then Reed, I think, would be the order for me.
Wicks second in snaps last week, which I think he's the third cheapest wide receiver of the Packers.
Which, for me, Green Bay, though, is a tournament play because you're just trying to guess right. You're like, hey, if I hit on this, Wicks gets 2 touchdowns and 100 yards. Awesome. I'm cashing.
I almost think if you play that, you got to play Love too, right?
Yeah, like in larger fields, if I'm playing in 1,000 plus field, I'm totally good with throwing Jordan Love, throw in one of the tight ends, throw in Wicks. You're going to have so much money to work
Watson's
with. Watson's
4,200.
Yeah, you can do a lot there. But I'm also okay with having 2 San Francisco guys, even if you're always worried, what if this is it's the Debo Ayuk game? I think they're going to score 30 plus. That's the offense I expect to score the most points this week. Again, as I said on the pod yesterday, Brock Purdy was my second favorite quarterback play this week after Mayfield. So I'm totally good with putting in 2 Niners. The thing that does scare me, though, about the Bucs defense, what I love, obviously, Todd Bowles, he blitzes a lot. That opens things up for you to potentially get sacks, although Jared Goff gets the ball out quick. It's a good offensive line. It could be tough. But, yeah, you have an elite defensive coordinator against Jared Goff. There's potential for some good things to happen. What scares me is there's 3 teams that are left in this 8 that are top 10 in play action rate. So 2 of them are the 2 teams in this game. It's Tampa Bay. It's Detroit. The other one is the Texans. So Kansas City and Detroit, middle of the pack on EPA per play against play action. Tampa Bay is 26th.
Ooh.
So
and Golf torched him the first time. 353, 2 touchdowns.
Right. This is a defense that has been getting beat by play action all season. This is an offense which, again, runs a lot of play action. Goff is obviously never trying to hold the ball long because it's he's not scrambling around back there. And it's a good offensive line. Ben Johnson's a good offensive coordinator. He's probably going to be a head coach next year. If not, awesome, because if things keep going bad for the Giants, that's a guy I'd love to hire. But so there is risk here. But again, I also think Todd Bowles, one of the sharpest defensive minds, he saw what did not work last game.
And what did in the second half, because the Rams made adjustments in the second half and really kind of slowed down that line's off. Yeah.
So I'm at 2,500. I'm willing to bet on Todd Bowles. And like you said, I think we're both feeling like there's almost always an upset. I don't like Ravens Texans. I'm rooting for it, but not betting on that one.
Be shocked, right? If either of the number 1 seeds lose, I would be shocked.
Yeah, I would be a little bit less shocked because I could just see another monster like Jordan Love, LaFleur in his bag type game, and they pull it out in a shootout.
I don't know. The Niners have got Armstead coming back, which he hasn't played in quite some time. He solidifies their run, and then they can really let Chase Young and Nick Bosa, because like literally those three have basically not played together. I think people are underestimating what that's going to mean for their front four, because Armstead is one of the best defensive linemen against the run in the league. And that's going to allow those two monster pass rushers just be like, okay, we are going to tee off on you. Yeah.
So, I don't love that one either. I do, again, I think there's going to be a reasonable number of points in that game. But so I don't love that. I'm with you on the Bills versus Kansas City. I'm worried, the two games less rest. Buffalo's defense has been playing much better recently, but they're still, down a number of starters, especially at the linebacker position, which you have Travis Kelce on the other side. You're a little worried. I also just don't think that's a high scoring game though. So yeah, I'm willing to roll the dice on the Bucs. The one thing I will say is I really considered switching up my lineup to toss out Amon-Ra as much as, Amon-Ra.
1,100.
Yeah, because you can just save that money, and then I can get out of the Justice Hill business.
Who would you have had there? Because would the lineup basically been the same?
So what I would swap out if I got rid of Justice Hill, I had two different lineups that I strongly considered. So in both of them, I would have to drop out Kittle for Likely, which again, love Kittle in this matchup. He's my top tight end. But Likely's right there with Andrews out. Because again, Houston, awful against tight ends. So really, to me, that's kind of like a toss-up there. Then I can go Aaron Jones running back, because if there's one Packer player I feel good about in a cash game, it's Aaron Jones, because much like McCaffrey, don't really care about game script. I think it's probably, it's always a little bit better if you're winning or it's super tight the whole game for a running back. But both those guys are workhorses. And Green Bay was not treating him like that. I think probably because he's banged up a lot of the year. Again, though, 4 straight games, 20-plus carries, 110-plus yards. So I love having Aaron Jones in the lineup. I just hate losing Amon-Ra. If I do that, I can throw in Rashee Rice, because it's as much as, again, I'm with you. I think Buffalo probably wins. Feels fucking weird to just be like, I'm putting no Kansas City players in my lineup. And again, a guy who has back-to-back 120-plus yard games. He has rolled off 7 straight games of double-digit points.
He's their number one pass catcher. Like, he has surpassed Kelce and all the data, like yards per route run, targets per route run, like you name it.
And then, again, if you're thinking Buffalo wins, you're probably like, all right, maybe they got to pass a little bit more. If you're going the other direction and you're like, I think Kansas City's winning this game, I want Isaiah Pacheco in my lineup, because Isaiah Pacheco, that's what you usually want to do against Buffalo, right? Punch them in the mouth, control the ball, limit the opportunities for Buffalo so you get that Josh Allen turnover. If you're running clock the whole game, that 1 or 2 turnovers, they're much larger than if it's a crazy passing back and forth. That's going to give Allen more opportunities to get back in the game. So you want to control clock. In that case, we're getting Pacheco. That frees up another $300. I get Nico Collins in there because, again, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit scores 6 points against that not often. What am I trying to say? That awesome Ravens defense. He still had a 20-plus point game. Still dominated that game, just not in a way that led to real points, but to fantasy points.
So is that still Baker Evans, though?
Yeah, I'm still rolling. Again, the rest stays the same. We're Baker, we're McCaffrey, we're Evans. We're locking those in. We got Shakir, we got Otten, we got Bucks D. What we're swapping out is Kittle for Likely, which, again, I think you can really kind of go either way there. And then you're dropping Justice Hill and Amon-Ra for a combo of either, and both of these work out to exactly $0 left. You can either go Pacheco Collins, which if you're in on Kansas City winning, I think that's the move. If you're in on Buffalo winning, then I like Rashee Rice more, and I get Aaron Jones in there. So I'm probably going to play all three of those lineups. So that original one I went through, plus these two alternates, because I'm keeping most of my guys the same, which is what you're generally trying to do, because if you play a totally different lineup, what are the odds you're cashing in both?
Touche.
But that way, if Justice Hill scores 2 points, I'm not just going to feel really stupid because I didn't get a second good running back in some of my lineups. So those are probably the three lineups that I'm going to be going with this weekend.
I like it. Again, the only real changes I could see me making from my lineup would be just maybe playing the Allen, Shakir, and Kincaid stack, and from there you could do Nico Collins.
I don't mind that.
You know, you can do CMC, and then like I would probably have Wicks if I remember correctly, and Kittle as my flex. So, any other big thoughts before we get out of here? Because we did good. We're under 45 minutes. I am shocked.
I mean, like I said, I think I really like the Green Bay play in large fields. Because
you're talking multi-entry, right? Or just large cash games too?
I'm I generally only try to play single entry, but if I'm in a single entry with 8,000 people or whatever, then sure, like let's play Green Bay. Let's see if I can guess the right one or two receivers, and I'll be golden. Versus, again, if you're don't do this in your $50 against 500 other guys. Don't do it in that one, because what are the odds you guess right? But in a huge field or a multi-entry field, because then hey, fuck it, like do
my two big entries this week: 555 people, 277. Like I think the smaller the field in an 8-game slate, if you get 3 of your 4 expensive guys right,
that's true.
You're having a good day. If you have,
which is why we're going Evans, McCaffrey,
exactly,
Amon-Ra.
And again, I don't know, man. You keep making me want to maybe go with Nico. I don't know. I do think that Ravens D is legit. And it was week 1, but they did give Stroud issues then. I know that was also when they were doing a lot of moving around with the offensive line, but I don't know, man. It's also been different. The Texans have not been as good outdoors too. As great as CJ Stroud has been this year, he's another one of those guys. If you look at the splits, I mean, it's not uncommon. Obviously, if you're playing in a dome, it's a lot easier than when you're playing outdoors. So, again, be sure. Go ahead.
One more thing I wanted to throw out there. Tampa Bay. This is from the Sumer Sports Playoff Preview, which if you're just generally a football fan, I would say check out. It's free. You just give them your email and they send it to you. Tampa Bay runs cover 3 30% of the time, and they run cover 1 27% of the time. So 57% of the time, they're playing one deep safety. So according to Sumer Sports, that's their data. The most vulnerable route, especially against cover 3, it's going to be a go route. Jameson Williams is down there in that 36 or 3,700 amount. So with my main lineup that I did, if you swapped out you swapped in likely for Kittle, you could drop Otten and then just go, fuck it, Jameson Williams. If I get a 60-yard touchdown,
I still think that's the Reynolds play and not.
I think Reynolds is the safer play. So maybe
he's only 200 more. He's 3,700. Williams is 500.
Right. He's more consistent with the targets, with the
he's
receptions.
A burner too.
So maybe, that's fair. So Jameson Williams might be a little bit more of a deeper field play, but I like that.
I like that GPP a lot because it's crazy that he's not had a game yet this year, basically, where he scored basically 8 to 12 points in almost every game. And it's like, this dude is so electric. He was one of the best receivers I've ever seen after the catch, ever. He was constantly in college, just making people miss, them running over dudes, and then he was gone. And you just have not seen that in the NFL.
I remember because I always try to go through the PFF, draft breakdowns, and with receivers I always try to go at least all right, who are the top 20 ranked receivers, and I compare all their stats to try to find interesting things. I remember in the top, it was 20 or 25, however many I managed to go through fully that year, he was top 5 in ADOT, so how deep down the field his targets were. And he was top 5 in yards after the catch.
He led the country in yards after the catch his last year at Alabama.
Right. So he's getting deep balls, and then he's still getting a bunch of yak, which tells you just how, potentially special he is. So obviously, we have not fully seen it for a variety of reasons in the NFL yet. But yeah, against a team that blitzes a lot, that plays a high number of, one deep looks. Yeah, either of those Detroit receivers, I think, are really interesting, even beyond Amon-Ra, which, again, Jared Goff, not a bad play because Tampa Bay bad against play action.
And he torched him the only time they played
he
this
torched
year
him
at
last
Tampa,
time.
which he's normally not good on the road, and he's great at home. So, yeah, I get that.
So, also consider that. Again, it's a tough one. All
right, Joe, let's not get carried away here. We're trying to give people a line. It's not start confusing
last thing I'll say, though.
Oh, my God.
Like I said on the pod yesterday, I really liked all the lower tier quarterbacks. I think you stay out of the Stroud business.
I agree with that.
Stay out of he'll torch because I say this. Stay out of the Mahomes business.
To me, it's Allen or those 3 bottom guys.
Yeah,
or
the lower tier guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you. All right. Again, if you do not or are not aware, Ryan Mulvey, friend of the show, host of the Inside Drive in Northwest Florida, had a seizure Wednesday during the show. Found out he has a tumor in his brain. Dude was back at work today. Like, what a freaking animal. One of the many reasons I love Ryan talking in his Brock Purdy jersey. Seriously, one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. He would talk sports all day. Great young radio host. I know he's got some tough weeks ahead, but I know he's going to, be back and better than ever. And he's already proved that even in the interim, he's going to be doing the show, which is just, I absolutely freaking love. Be sure to follow both of us on Twitter, and be sure, seriously, to follow all of the great stuff on Fantasy and Frames. That's the YouTube channel. Wendy, we appreciate you. Thanks, Wendy, for being here. And I appreciate your message the other day about Ryan. Stefania Bell actually retweeted and told 49ers Nation to give him some love. Yeah. He's been overwhelmed by just all the support from, he went to Coastal Carolina, a lot of people from that area, Panama City. He lived in Augusta. He's got people in Atlanta. You send him a message from Arizona. He's getting messages from everywhere. So he feels the love and support, and I know he appreciates it. Again, just an unbelievable dude who's both allowed me and you to do some cool things. So, follow Fantasy and Frames. Check out all their cool stuff. We are degenerates. We will be back next week, probably talking for 2 hours about 4 teams, because that's just who we are. We can't help it. We turn going over 2 lineups into a 47-minute pod, and we're proud of ourselves. But for Keith and Joe, we love you guys. Seriously, thanks for all the support. Let's hit that badass intro, exit. What do you call it? Music at the end. What do you call it at the end?
Is it an outro, right?
Outro, yeah. It's like an Innie and an Audi. And we'll see you guys soon.